Hello and welcome. This is India Global. I'm Gaurie Dwivedi. Let's start the show with headlines this evening. First up, the state of Israel versus Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu takes witness stand in a corruption case that is set to shape or reshape Israeli politics. Suspect in the killing of United Healthcare CEO is now in custody. 26-year-old suspect Luigi Mangione has been charged with murder as he was finally spotted by a McDonald's employee. Indian police sends legal notice to Elon Musk's Starlink. Starlink gets a notice in a $4.25 billion drug smuggling case. It puts the spotlight on where do technology companies' lawsuits woes start. South Korea's political turmoil deepens as Parliament passes bill to launch special counsel probe in the ongoing case of the impeachment of the South Korean president. And India Global gets you an exclusive conversation with the Indian actress Chaya Kadam, whose movie has been nominated for the Golden Globe Awards. All right, the big story that we are tracking today is the state of Israel versus Benjamin Netanyahu. This Tuesday on India Global, we go first straight to Israel, where the criminal trial in the case of Netanyahu versus the state has finally begun. Israel's Prime Minister has taken the witness stand inside a very packed Tel Aviv District Court for a testimony in his ongoing corruption trial. In fact, we tell you the first words that came out of Netanyahu's mouth when he was really trying to present his case is that this is the opportunity to dispel the allegations against me. There is a great absurdity in the charges and great injustice. In fact, this isn't it. He also spoke saying that he's waited for 8 years for this day to clear his name. And in fact, Netanyahu is on trial on 3 corruption charges. And we tell you just that. He faces charges of fraud and breach of trust in case 1000 and case 2000, and charges of bribery as well as fraud and breach of trust. The first revolves around allegations that the Prime Minister and his wife, Sarah, received expensive gifts illicitly from Hollywood media mogul Anand Milchan. The second case pivots around fraud and breach of trust over his alleged attempt to reach a quid pro quo with the publisher of a newspaper. And the third and the most important and a very serious crime that the Prime Minister faces is around authorizing regulatory decisions that financially benefited a telecom giant shareholder hundreds of millions of shekels. Okay, so these are the 3 charges that he faces. Now, so how will Benjamin Netanyahu's testimony unfold? His trial that began at 10 a.m., that's the schedule, every Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, all the way till December. And the court sessions are scheduled from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. local time. So that's the schedule that the Prime Minister will have to follow like any other accused standing trial. Now, in the following weeks, he is to give testimony every Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday until the end of December. Now, meanwhile, protesters gathered outside the court, both in support as well as against the Prime Minister. Remember, he's someone who evokes very strong and very sharp responses from his people. There are those who hate him, and he now has a very loyal support base as those who really stand behind the Prime Minister. He's facing corruption charges that could be see him sentenced up to 10 years in prison. Interestingly, the trial began in 2020 May and has been delayed several times. All right, as we keep a close watch on what's happening in Israel, we now take a turn and find out what's the latest as far as the CEO who was killed last week. A massive 5-day manhunt later, authorities, that is the New York Police Department, have arrested this man suspected of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in a bold shooting that took place outside a Manhattan hotel last week. This report tells you and brings you up to speed with all that has happened in a case that has shaken America, Inc. and the world over.
5-day manhunt, a suspected CEO killer on the loose, and the U.S. on its feet. All of that culminated in the arrest of Luigi Mangione, a 26-year-old from Maryland. Mangione has been charged with the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, who was gunned down in Manhattan, New York on the 4th of December. Mangione was born and raised in the state of Maryland. He grew up in an affluent family and excelled in studies, from being named as the valedictorian in school to getting a bachelor's and master's degree in computer science from an Ivy League college. He fit the profile of a typical success story. But that wasn't to be. When Mangione was arrested, he was carrying a manifesto that speaks against corporate America. He has apologized for his actions in the document, but shockingly said that it had to be done, and when the U.S. authorities started their probe, they found a message scrawled on ammunition found at the crime scene. The words "deny, defend, and depose" were emblazoned on the ammunition, echoing a phrase used by the insurance industry critics. So how was Mangione caught? The biggest lead for the investigators was a CCTV grab of the suspect. Mangione could be seen smiling because he was supposedly flirting with the hostel staffer. Mangione was arrested in Altoona, Pennsylvania on Monday after a tip-off from a McDonald's employee who recognized him from the police appeals. Mangione's arrest has fueled online discourse, with hashtags like Free Luigi trending on platforms such as X, Instagram, TikTok, and Reddit. His Instagram account gained thousands of followers as users rally behind him, portraying him as an anti-establishment figure. Criticism of the U.S. healthcare system has intensified, with many citing personal struggles with insurers. With Vishal Vivek, Bureau Report for NDTV World.
All right, we now turn our focus to a very important data point coming in from the U.S. And really will decide how American universities will be viewed by Indian students. The number of U.S. visas that have been issued to students, Indian students, has hit multi-year lows. This as Indian students now make up the largest international student cohort on American campuses. As per latest data, there is now a 38% drop in F1 student visas that have been issued to Indians in this year, January to September period, as compared to last year. In fact, last year, over 1 lakh F1 visas were issued to Indian students. And this year, that number stands at just about 64,000. Now, F1 is the non-immigrant visa category, which is given to most Indian students, 90% of them, that are studying in the US right now. And the drop is very significant since Indian students, as I said, make up about 30% of all international students. And it comes ahead of stringent visa rules that are likely to be put in place under Trump 2.0 administration. And the drop may also reflect a shift in demand patterns of Indian students, given that the post-COVID surge for college admissions has now pretty much been petered out. Data reflects that thousands of visa appointment slots for Indian students actually remained unutilized in the months of May, June and July. This is just ahead of the fall semester that starts around August to September end. Now, what does this indicate? This indicates a possible shift towards other overseas destinations for Indian students, and that could be Canada, Germany and the UK. If this trend continues, it has serious repercussions for American universities because they are also living and being able to keep themselves sustained on Indian students. All right, shifting focus now to smugglers who've actually, with $4.2 billion worth of meth, have been caught in the biggest such Indian seizure. But who's caught in the web of all this? Well, it is Starlink, Elon Musk's Starlink. Why? Because Indian police have sent a legal demand to Starlink seeking details of who purchased its internet device that helped in the sea navigation. Now, Starlink has been asked for the purchaser's name, payment method, registration details, all of it, to find out where exactly did that internet device was it used. Smugglers travelled in international waters from Myanmar to India, and what followed is the fact that this could actually raise very serious repercussions from a security and strategic point of view for tech companies and particularly for Starlink. Let's get in Kaushal Bheda, who's director of Pelorus Technologies, to understand the implications of this, why this is significant for Starlink, for Elon Musk, and for tech companies in general. Kaushal, how do you see this, this demand that has been raised, and the fact that how Indian police now wants to dig deeper into Starlink's dealings when it comes to this particular case, and the ramifications of that for Starlink in general?
So, can you hear me well?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so we know that a Starlink device was found on this boat. A joint operation was carried out, and we had a successful drug bust of 6,000 kgs of meth. Now, our law enforcement agencies have contacted Starlink, and the issue here is that Starlink does not have any permission to provide coverage in India or in our territorial waters, because we have not provided them a license, or the government has not provided them a license to operate here, and nor does it have any gateway with landing rights. And because there is no local gateway here, our law enforcement agencies are not privy to certain information that they would require in terms of lawful interception when somebody uses a satellite modem or a phone for unlawful activities. Information that they can demand under Section 69 of the IT Act or the updated telecom interception rules. So in the case of sat phones, for example, you need special DOT permission to use it in India.
So, Kaushal, what does this mean for Starlink's prospects? What does it mean for Starlink's India prospects? They don't have a permission, they want to enter the market, they want to enter this territory, but as things stand right now, there's a case against them for this very specific issue.
So Starlink is going to prioritize global connectivity, right? I mean, it's going to leave the enforcement to local authorities. So it's up to, I think for Starlink to operate here, our authorities are going to work with them, and they're going to come to an agreement on how to get the right information that is required by the agencies here.
Okay, and Kaushal, then let me ask you this, that is Starlink also going the dark web way?
Not really. I mean, look, there's got to be a balance between privacy and national security. Ultimately, our law enforcement agencies need to get what they need to get in terms of information. I'm sure that they'll work it out with the right nodal officers on the Starlink end, and I think we should get the information that we need.
And one final question, Kaushal, what does it mean in terms of tech companies? Because, there are some who may say that this is actually overreach because, you're reaching out and trying to get the richest companies in the world. Of course, the law and order and the law side of it is very clear. But what would you say to some of those tech companies who may say this is actually overreach?
Say follow the law that the Indian laws, and why do the law enforcement agencies need this information? Ultimately, they need it because they want to keep you and me safe. So I think this is a legit demand, and there should be compliance.
All right, Kaushal, we'll leave it there. Thanks much for speaking to us on a story that we're going to keep coming to as it unfolds. All right, on that note, we slip into a very short break. We come back with lots more on the other side, including an exclusive conversation with Chaya Kadam on her movie that's made it to the Golden Globes. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching India Global. We now turn our attention to the latest that's unfolding in South Korea. The political crisis continues to deepen as Parliament approves a bill to launch a special council probe into President Yoon and his controversial attempt to impose the martial law. The decision comes after the main opposition party, that is the Democratic Party, accused President Yoon of insurrection in connection with last week's martial law declaration, which saw armed special forces being deployed in the streets of Seoul. Although President Yoon narrowly avoided impeachment when ruling party lawmakers abstained from a floor vote, the opposition leaders have vowed to file a new impeachment petition this week. Now, in the meantime, the president is under a travel ban as the investigation unfolds. This special council probe marks a critical escalation in South Korea's political turmoil as opposition parties intensify their efforts to hold the president accountable through legislative and legal measures. Right. On to the latest that's happening in America ahead of Donald Trump's upcoming administration taking over come 20th of January. He has nominated Indian American Harmeet K. Dhillon as the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights at the Department of Justice. An accomplished attorney, Dhillon is known for her legal battles against the big tech and defending religious freedom during COVID-19 and challenging the discriminatory corporate policies. Trump praised her as a leading election lawyer committed to protecting election integrity. And born in Chandigarh, Dhillon moved to the US as a child and made history in 2016 as the first Indian American to appear on stage at the GOP convention. She is now the fourth Indian American, Indian origin nominee for Trump's upcoming cabinet. All right, staying with some Trump-related news, in the wake of election victory, Trump has launched a new fragrance line titled Fight, Fight, Fight. Yes, that's the name of the fragrance line. Ahead of Christmas, the name reference on an iconic moment during his campaign when he survived an assassination attempt, shouting, "Fight, fight, fight" in the aftermath. The fragrance line includes perfumes, colognes and Trump-branded watches, adding to the roster of items Trump has promoted recently, such as NFT trading cards and autographed guitars priced at upwards of $10,000. All right, from Lapata ladies to all we imagine as light, Chaya Kadam has had an extraordinary 2024. The acclaimed actor stars in All We Imagine as Light, a groundbreaking film that's directed by Payal Kapadia, which has earned a historic Golden Globe nomination for Best Director, the first ever for an Indian filmmaker. The film has swept international acclaim, being named Best International Film by both the New York Film Critics Circle and the Gotham Awards. It was also declared the best film of the year by the esteemed Sight and Sound magazine. We're now having Chaya join us live to talk more about her journey and what it feels like to have one of her movies now in the Golden Globe list. Chaya, thank you so much for speaking to NDTV, taking out the time. My first question to you is, आप अनकन्वेंशनल कैरेक्टर्स जैसे लापता लेडीज़ है, ऑल वी इमेजिन इज लाइट है, उन सब में काम कर रही हैं. कैसा रहा है 2024 आपके लिए और कैसे रहे ये सारे कैरेक्टर्स?
यस 2024 मेरे लिए बहुत सारे सरप्राइज़ लेके आया है. सो बहुत खुश हूँ कि 2024 में एक तो लापता लेडीज़ मेरे हिस्से में आई और मंजू माई जैसा कैरेक्टर मुझे करने को मिला. किरण राव की मैं यानी हमेशा के लिए थैंकफुल रहूँगी कि एक एक्टर को मंजू माई जैसा कैरेक्टर प्ले करने के लिए मिलना बहुत बड़ी बात है, क्योंकि कुछ कैरेक्टर्स है ना कि सिर्फ फिल्म तक सीमित नहीं रहते. वो कैरेक्टर है ना ज़िंदगी भर आपके साथ रहते और आपकी हिम्मत बढ़ाते रहते. तो मंजू माई मेरे लिए वैसी थी. और उसके बाद आया ऑल वी इमेजिन एज लाइट वाली पार्वती. और ये दोनों कैरेक्टर है ना बहुत स्ट्रॉन्ग लेडी है.
Indeed.
तो बहुत मज़ा आया करने के लिए. और ऐसे कैरेक्टर है ना जिनके जैसे पार्वती के लिए पार्वती का चलना बोलना, और पार्वती के पॉजेस बहुत बोलते हैं. तो उसके ऊपर काम करने में बहुत मज़ा आया. और किरण राव और पायल कपाड़िया
विमेन डायरेक्टर्स,
बहुत यानी
विमेन
proud
डायरेक्टर्स के
feel
साथ
होता है
हिस्ट्री
इन दोनों
हिस्ट्री
के
लिखी
बारे
जा
में।
रही है विमेन
Hello.
डायरेक्टर्स के साथ। क्या बोलेंगी आप कि अब इंडस्ट्री में और विमेन डायरेक्टर्स आ रही हैं और उनका काम जो है वो दुनिया भर में सराहा जा रहा है। दुनिया के बड़े बड़े फेस्टिवल्स में विमेन लेड स्टोरीज, विमेन डायरेक्टेड
Yes.
स्टोरीज एंड फिल्म्स आगे बढ़ रही हैं।
यस यस यस, ये यानी बहुत बड़ी बात है। मुझे शुरू से ना बहुत यानी लेडी डायरेक्टर अगर है ना तो मुझे इतनी खुशी मिलती है ना कि मैं स्टोरी सुनने से पहले ही ऐसे लगता है कि यार इनके साथ कुछ तो करने को मिलना चाहिए। सो पायल और किरण के साथ काम करने के लिए मिला, वाओ। और
पायल कपाड़िया के
सिर्फ,
साथ काम करना कैसा रहा?
फिल्में बनाई नहीं, 2 फिल्में ऐसी बनाई पायल के साथ,
जी,
अरे बहुत ही यानी ना बहुत सालों के बाद इस फिल्म के लिए हम लोग ने जो वर्कशॉप किया था, यानी मेरे लिए वो यानी इतना कुछ सीखने को मिला ना कि वही है जो पॉजेस के साथ खेलने के लिए मिला है ना, वो बहुत ही अलग था, बहुत ही। यानी कुछ हम लोग ने जो कुछ 7-8 दिन वर्कशॉप किया, यानी मुंबई को इतनी अच्छी तरीके से समझ के लेना, यस, यानी पार्वती हमेशा मेरे लिए एकदम खास रहेगी। और सेम है वापस लापता लेडीज
जी
को लेके।
ये बताइए इससे
यानी छोटी छोटी बातें कि
इंडियन सिनेमा पे, इंडियन फिल्म मेकिंग पे कितना असर पड़ेगा कि ये इतनी बड़े अवार्ड्स में जैसे गोल्डन ग्लोब है उसमें मूवी सिलेक्ट हो गई है, मूवी शॉर्टलिस्ट हो गई है, ऑल वी इमेजिन एज लाइट, उससे इंडियन सिनेमा पे कितना बड़ा असर पड़ेगा, फिल्म मेकिंग पे कितना असर पड़ेगा?
देखो इससे ये फर्क पड़ेगा ना, मुझे ऐसे लग रहा है कि बहुत ऐसी ये वैसे देखा जाए तो कमर्शियल फिल्में नहीं, ये बहुत कुछ अलग बताना चाहती है, अलग दिखाना चाहती है ये फिल्में। तो अगर ऐसी फिल्में बड़े बड़े फेस्टिवल में अगर सिलेक्ट होती है ना, तो बहुत लोगों का हौसला बढ़ता है कि हमारे बहुत लोग फिर ऐसी अलग अलग कहानियाँ लेके आएंगे। तो मुझे लगता है कि ये बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है इंडियन सिनेमा के लिए। और बहुत अंदर से ऐसे लगता है कि अगर नॉमिनेशन हुआ है तो हम ऐसे ही नहीं आएंगे, कुछ लेके ही आएंगे।
जी बिल्कुल, बहुत रिकग्निशन तो लेके ही आएंगे और पूरी उम्मीद है कि आप अवार्ड भी लेके आए। छाया कदम, थैंक यू सो मच फॉर स्पीकिंग to me on a very historic nomination of a movie that is set to change Indian cinema, Indian filmmaking, but most importantly, bring female directors, female-led movies at the very forefront of Indian cinema going forward. On that note, we slip into a very short break. We come back with a very important discussion on Syria and what happens next in the Syrian conflict. Stay with us. You're watching a special edition of India Global where we talk about the next step as far as the Syrian conflict is concerned. The country is in a war zone for the last 13 years and continues to remain so. But what happens next for Syria? And most importantly, what's the latest developments happening right now? And on your screens are in fact some of those important voices that we are going to keep telling, and that is Abu Muhammad al-Julani, who said that we will offer rewards to anyone who provides information about senior army personnel of the Syrian army. And he goes on to say that security officers involved in war crimes is what they are hunting. And that tells you why it's important to talk about the future of war-torn Syria, which is also remains the biggest migrant crisis in the world, remains more uncertain than ever. And in fact, the terrorist, as I said, Abu Muhammad al-Julani is now hunting and is wanting to get a list of all those who've been involved in the last 13 years civil war. That message he actually posted on Telegram. And on ground, rescue workers from the country's White Helmets have issued a statement. They say the group has ended their search operations for possible detainees in secret cells or basement at Syria's notorious military prison without finding anyone. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, a UK-based monitoring group, says that 60,000 people were either tortured or killed. I think it was 600,000 people in Assad's government's prisons. As the theatre of war shifts, Israeli warplanes have reportedly carried out over 100 attacks across the country. Before we move any further, take a look at this profile of who this man is, this rebel leader.
Безусловно, сейчас время глубокого анализа происходящих событий, и сейчас пока трудно предугадать окончательной формы, скажем так, которая последует после этого периода неопределенности.
In the fog of Syria's brutal war, one man has been trying to position himself as a symbol of defiance. A terrorist whose actions have shocked the world. A deadly character whose rise is as mysterious as his motives. Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, the head of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, has led a sanctioned terrorist group that inflicted a staggering defeat on one of the most powerful regimes in the region. The fall of Aleppo was a game changer, a victory for the so-called anti-government forces and a bitter blow to President Bashar al-Assad. But at the heart of this historic shift was Abu Muhammad al-Julani, a terrorist with a $10 million bounty on his head. His rise to power has been a double-edged sword. For years, he's led his forces with ruthless efficiency, dealing the final blow to the Assad regime, which had ruled for over 50 years. While his military prowess cannot be questioned, al-Julani's reputation must take precedence. A leader of Al-Qaeda's former Syrian branch, al-Julani is a man with blood on his hands. His group has been linked to countless atrocities, and his name is on the United Nations list of designated terrorists. For all his victories, al-Jolani is still a villain. His actions have led to the suffering of innocent Syrians, collateral damage in a war that has torn the nation apart. The blood of innocents stain his record, and his group's harsh tactics are often indistinguishable from those of the regime that they fight. Al-Jolani's forces claim to fight for justice, to break the shackles of oppression, but their track record shows a different story, one of extreme ideology and brutal violence. With Arjun Samar Mahendran, Bureau Report for NDTV.
Okay, you heard who the rebel man is, the rebel leader is. It's important to know his past, and it's important to know his thoughts, and only then we will be able to understand what lies ahead for Syria. And as the theatre of war shifts, Israeli warplanes have reportedly carried out over 100 strikes across the country, including in the capital, Damascus, within the last 12 hours. They say it is to ensure that the chemical weapons that Assad's regime used and has will be dismantled, because who knows who comes next. But it's not just Israel. US has also reportedly struck down 75 ISIS targets in Syria after the regime's collapse in the last 48 hours. On the diplomatic front, Kremlin spokesperson has said that it was Syrian President Bashar Assad's personal decision to step down and leave his country. European countries are now, what are they doing? Whether it's UK, whether it's Austria and several others, they've suspended the process of processing any of the asylum applications for Syrians that are pending. Germany, UK, France, Greece have all said that they will now halt all asylum decisions. The move is to ensure that thousands of Syrians that are there are forced to either, or in fact, ensure that they go back to their country. How that process unfolds remains to be seen, because uncertainty is still in the air. And most importantly, no one knows who will be the next government and what shape it will actually take. It could actually be the biggest migrant crisis in the world. 14 million Syrians have been forced to flee their houses since 2011. And who knows what could be the next wave of migrants and refugees seeking refuge, because what happens next in Syria? As I said, you heard about Abu Muhammad al-Julani's background, and that could potentially shape the government. We come back after this break. We talk about what could be next for Syria, as the conflict may have stopped, but the uncertainty looms large. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching India Global. We are now turning our attention to the Syrian conflict in terms of what happens next. You heard before going into the break in terms of the latest developments that are unfolding. The migrant crisis may in fact happen again, though refugees are being asked to go back to Syria, even as there are some pockets of ISIS strongholds that are being bombarded by both US and Israel. What happens next? Where do we go? Where does the country go? And what does it mean for the region and the world is our big question. Dr. Omer Anas joins us from Ankara to talk more on this. Professor Andrew Latham, he's joining us from Minnesota, and Dr. Awad from New Delhi. He's a Syrian on the show and best placed to talk about what's happening right now. Though, of course, Dr. Omer, let me start with you, given the fact that Turkey is pretty much at the center of what's unfolding right now in Syria. And by all accounts, it's a great positive for President Erdogan right now. How do you think, and how much do you think Turkey will play a role in shaping Syria from here on?
Let me begin by saying that it is not one of the best scenarios which Turkey was expecting. If you follow the news of the last 6 months, in July 24, President Erdogan especially invited President Bashar al-Assad to visit Ankara and to speak about the normalization process between Turkey and Syria, and especially the status of the future of refugees. And these things were supposed to be sorted out between the two presidents. But on the second day, President Assad rejected the offer. And then again, in the Astana meeting on 12th of November, again, President Erdogan said that he is still hopeful that President Assad will be positive about the meeting. However, I think that there were certain developments.
Dr. Anas, are you saying that the rebels who are backed by Turkey right now and are set to form the government with the full support of Ankara is not an outcome that works well for Mr. Erdogan, both politically and in terms of a one-upmanship game in the region?
Of course, it will be very much favorable for Turkey. But as I told you that in the background, Erdogan was actively seeking a discussion with President Assad. Why? We have to focus on this issue, because as of now, the situation is that the security situation in Syria and in the region is quite fragile, because there is no state and there is no one authority there. And so you can see that Israel has been attacking almost every airport. Largest number of airstrikes Israel has made in the past. This could have been avoided if Bashar al-Assad and Erdogan have negotiated a positive outcome. It was avoidable.
Okay.
However, because Bashar al-Assad again started attacking on Idlib, and then the leadership in Idlib, especially the HTS and other militant groups, they were already prepared for certain things. Let me also add this point. At this point, the state which Assad was controlling, it was like a dead body. It was shallow because there was no political reform. And that is why,
Okay.
without much military effort,
Okay, so we have,
it
you
can
are
come.
hopeful that there will be political reform with the government that will come over. I have my doubts there, and that's the reason why I played out that profile of the rebel leader first, so that our viewers also know the background of the man and the Al-Qaeda thought process which has birthed his entire movement. Professor Andrew, let me ask you this. I have only three major questions to ask in the discussion. One is about the people, what happens to them. Secondly, how skeptical should we be about the fact that will Syria then become another Afghanistan, because you have people with Al-Qaeda thought process taking over. And the third and the most important question also is that what happens to the entire region? And that's exactly what I'm going to ask you, but one by one. In your assessment, is Syria set to be the next Afghanistan?
Potentially, it could be. We could have, and we've had state failure there for a long time, but it could descend into chaos. There are two narratives about Jolani, of course, one of which is that over the decades he has evolved and he's no longer a jihadist, an Islamist, and he's more of a technocrat, a state builder, a statesman, in fact. And he's been promulgating that. I think it's a myth, personally. But it's plausible, I suppose. And the other narrative, though, is that this is all just tactical. He's making noises about being accommodating to the Druze and the Alawites and the Christians because he knows in the short term he needs stability. And saying those words might help him get the stability he needs to build the state he wants. And that state may well be it might be a failed project, in which case we have Afghanistan. Well, two versions of Afghanistan, one of which was the failed state under the United States, and the other one is the successful state, in a sense, of the Taliban-dominated state today. And we might see, might hear an echo of that in Syria.
Exactly.
It remains to be seen. I'm
Exactly.
pessimistic, to be honest.
I'll tell you what, Professor Andrew, there's a saying in India, there's a saying in Hindi, which says that an elephant has two sets of teeth. One is the expensive ivory ones, which he shows to the world, and the ones with which he actually eats. And that's exactly what it could be here in the case of Abu al-Jolani as well. That
exactly.
There is a
And
facade for the world.
While we're talking about elephants, there's an old African proverb: when elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. And so
Indeed,
the Syrian
there is another proverb there. Absolutely, yes. So, Dr. Awad, then let me ask you about the refugees, as well as the fact that there could be another possible migrant crisis that the world may have to brace itself for, simply because the uncertainty in Syria could make way for an Islamist extremist regime that may not be a better or a superior option than the Assad regime. Or will it be a better option? Okay, you have to unmute yourself, sir.
I'm sorry. I think every wise man in Syria and a reasonable educated person is thinking of leaving Syria because they know that these forces, 70% of them, they are not Syrian, by the way. They are all Uzbek, Tajik, Kurd, they are Turk, they are from the northern Marrakesh, they are all Al-Qaeda. And HTS stands for Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which was Al-Qaeda, which is affiliated to ISIS. And we all know that Julani was promoted in Iraq to Amir, to a prince, because he killed enough Iraqis that he got that rank of being an Amir. So therefore, to change the skin of the snake, we don't think that Syria is going to be a better place. And especially with these people who have thrown out their passport from Igor and all, sold it at the retail price in Idlib, are willing to go back. They came to make a Khalifa. Came to make an Imarat of Taliban, of Al-Qaeda, revival of Al-Qaeda. So I don't want to blame anybody but the Syrian people and even the Syrian government, who have given the opportunities to have a sleeping cell inside Syria, to have the people of Syria suffer and give that chance and advantage to the opposition and to vested interest nation to intervene in the Syrian affairs. And there were the mishap.
Dr. Anas, let me ask you this, that the role of global powers in the last 13, 14 years has pretty much been the core reason why Syria is where it is. Whether you take Russia, whether you take Iran, and now many are saying whether you take Turkey, because that is what is now going to shape the country. In your assessment, how do you see the Syrian crisis right now being used by Erdogan or by Turkey and those rebel forces that are being supported by Turkey. What, according to you, could be the top 2 or 3 outcomes from a Turkish point of view of how things are unfolding?
The topmost priority for 4 million Syrian refugees to safe places in safe cities. So to maintain stability and peace in Aleppo, in Hama, in Homs, in Damascus, in other major cities is and will be the top priority of Turkey, because they have huge economic pressure because of these 4 million refugees, and there's a lot of domestic political pressure on Erdogan. So I think that this is one of the most important things which Turkey is going to do. At the same time, what I follow from Turkish understanding right now is that Turkey is trying to engage almost all regional parties, especially Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, and of course, Russia and Iran, so that a regional understanding can be developed, because an unstable Syria right now, without a strong state, without a strong military, will be no less dangerous than Afghanistan. So to maintain peace and stability, especially stability in Syria, should be a shared concern of all countries in the region. And that is why...
Astana, okay. Yeah, the Astana process failed. And now what you're saying is another such round of talks should happen. Essentially, Professor Andrew, foreign powers will continue to be relevant and drive Syria going forward, which has been one of its curses, is probably another reason why they should stay right now and drive the future.
Yes, unfortunately for the Syrian people, Syria has become a playground or a battleground, as it were, for great powers vying for dominance in the region. And I would say that Turkey is the winner in that game. The losers are obviously Iran, the axis of resistance, the ring of fire, all of that. It's totally broken. And that might have consequences in terms of nuclear proliferation, but that's for a different show. Russia's clearly a loser. They're probably going to lose those 2 bases. And if they lose that air base, they lose a vital link to their African efforts, geopolitical efforts. So that's a problem as well.
They also get, the route to Black Sea may also get impacted because they need to have Turkey on their side to cross that Bosphorus Sea area. And secondly, in the Eastern Mediterranean region, Russia will actually have no presence when it comes to NATO.
They will not. And the other losers in all of this potentially are the Kurds. To the extent that Turkey's hand is strengthened in all of this, that works to the detriment of the Kurds in the northeast of the country. And the other big loser is the United States, especially if the Kurds are their American partners and the United States supports the Kurdish. If that goes pear-shaped, as it were, then the United States is going to lose this as well.
Right.
And the American presence in the region is very unpopular in the United States.
Yes.
The 900 or so American troops, nobody in this country knows why they're there or what they're doing. So when we look at winners and losers, Turkey's the big winner, Assad is the big loser, but Iran is a loser, Russia's a loser, and the Syrian people, unfortunately, as has been the case for a long time,
have been the biggest losers and biggest sufferers. And Dr. Awad, let me then ask you this, that given the fact that there are different forces here in the region now, there are also different Islamic thought process that they follow. There are the rebels are Sunnis, but there are pockets which are Shia dominated. How does that now look in terms of going forward? Do you think they can all come together to form some semblance of a stable regime or a stable setup?
Well, let me just give a comment before I answer your question, because if the aspiration of the Syrian people left for the Syrian without a foreign intervention, that could be our dream. When the peaceful revolution took in 2011, and we thought for 6 months that it is going to happen and political reform, but that's never happened. But believe me, Gaurie, the single beneficiary of all this is Israel. Now, currently, Israel have made 400 sorties on Syria, destroyed totally the infrastructure of Syrian military, air force, defense system, defense line. They have encroached 10 kilometers away from Damascus capital. They have violated the 1974 truce of the United Nations Security Council resolution of the demilitarization of the power between the two countries. Now they are, I can tell you, just listen to my point, which I have mentioned in my article. that the American company in 2015 discovered oil in the Golan. And this oil tributary is 60 kilometers deep inside Syria. Now they are encroaching into those territories without any single resistance from anywhere. So basically, Turkey gifted Syria to Israel.
Okay, we don't have a representation from Israel to really counter some of those. And I've tried to be as fair as possible. And quick closing comment I want to give to Dr. Anas from Ankara. 30 seconds, I'm completely out of time. That one wish that you think will happen for Syria in foreseeable future. What do you think can possibly happen? 6 months, 1 year down the line.
A regional cooperation between Iran, Russia, Turkey, Saudi Arabia will be the best for Syrians. And I'm clearly that Turkey's ability should not be overstated or overestimated. Turkey does not have that much ability to deliver. So they need regional cooperation, especially with Iran and both Russia.
All right, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking out the time and speaking to me on India Global. The fact of the matter is, as some of the experts here said, Syria continues to need foreign powers. That has been the curse of the people of Syria the last 13, 14 years. And it looks like foreign powers, their intervention will not end in times to come, or at least in the foreseeable future. And it also looks unlikely that a stable, secular government may come to fore. Remains to be seen what will be the way out of the Syrian conflict. Thank you so much for watching this special show.